Welcome to the IVF Journey with Dr. Michael Chapman, the podcast for couples who struggle with infertility and want to fulfill their dreams of becoming parents. In this podcast, you'll learn actionable strategies to deal with infertility from Dr. Michael Chapman, or Prof as he's affectionately known. Prof is the co-founder of IVF Australia and is a leading Australian infertility specialist who has helped over 3,000 couples realise their dreams of becoming parents. To access previous episodes packed with ideas, solutions and tips that actually work, head over to Dr. Chapman's IVF podcast on iTunes. You can also ask questions by contacting Dr. Chapman's rooms on 1-800-111-483 or by emailing him michael.chapman@ivf.com.au.
That first cry of a baby born after the long journey of IVF remains one of the most beautiful experiences in the world. As an obstetrician and an IVF specialist, I've had the privilege of experiencing this over many thousands of times in my long career, but I still remain moved by each baby's first cry. It signifies the end of a long journey and the beginning of a new life. This is Professor Michael Chapman, co-founder of IVF Australia and host of the IVF Journey podcast. Thanks for tuning in. To access all the previous episodes, head over to my website, www.theivfjourney.com, and select IVF Journey Podcast from the navigation menu. You'll also be able to find the various services that we provide at IVF Australia. Today we're going to talk about whether you should have IVF or not. There's certainly considerable controversy about the place of IVF in treating infertility. There is no doubt that if you ask the question, what's going to get me pregnant quickest, it's IVF. Because using drugs, producing lots of eggs, selecting great embryos, we do better than nature. But there is a cost, both financial and psychological. So when should we move to IVF? Going back to basics, fertility is not a rapid production of a baby. In any natural cycle, in a woman less than 35, the odds of conceiving in the first couple of months of trying are no more than 15%, 1 in 6. 1 in 6 is like the roll of a dice. How many times can you roll a dice and not get a 6? But ultimately, the dice will lie on the 6 and you'll have a baby. Those statistics are why doctors are taught by their specialists like me that couples should be encouraged to keep trying for 12 months, because by 12 months, 12 rolls of the dice, the odds of a pregnancy are better than 90%, which in fact is significantly better than 1 cycle of IVF. Even 3 months of trying, if everything is normal, is better than 1 cycle of IVF. So to rush into IVF after 1 or 2 cycles of unhappiness, of not achieving a pregnancy, is wrong. Sadly, many couples do approach specialists and do want to be pregnant as soon as possible, and therefore do almost twist the arm of the specialist to get on with IVF. Those couples will have a very high success rate with IVF because they didn't really need it. In addition, treatment other than IVF is appropriate for a significant number of infertile couples. There is a group of patients who don't ovulate on a regular basis. These are mostly women with polycystic ovaries, but it can occur without diagnosis. For those patients, stimulating an egg to grow can be achieved using tablets, clomiphene or letrozole. These induce ovulation, the making of an egg, in about 80% of women with irregular periods. And amongst those, pregnancies will occur in 6 months of treatment, that's 6 cycles of treatment, in over 60%. So once again, better than a single IVF cycle. To take these tablets month on month and not have success and still keep going does require significant patience and belief that nature will do the job for you. If nature doesn't do the job, we have other approaches to inducing ovulation in women with polycystic ovaries, including other treatments for polycystic ovaries, which include using injections to stimulate the ovaries to make an egg, or diatherming the ovary, burning part of the ovary to change the endocrine, the hormone environment within the ovary to allow nature to move through the ovulation process. Again, these approaches have good success rates, although patience, again, is necessary. So all of this is fine if you're 30 and you've got time up your sleeve. Once you're getting to 37, 38, however, time is of the essence because egg quality is declining, as are egg numbers. And so in that situation, inducing ovulation is worth trying, but one must look to more aggressive treatments fairly soon. The next step up, and again, an alternative to going straight to IVF, is intrauterine insemination. So this involves the insertion of a prepared sample of sperm at the time when an egg is coming down the fallopian tube. All this is doing is enhancing what nature should be doing routinely. Research suggests that doing intrauterine insemination with natural ovulation can be enhanced by stimulating the ovaries to probably by producing 2 or 3 eggs, odds of success are increased. However, with this comes the risk of multiple pregnancy. So IUI should be monitored very carefully. If IUI doesn't work after a couple of cycles, generally then is the place for IVF. The downsides of IVF, as I've already mentioned, are its cost and the psychological trauma that goes with it. Patients who've been through IVF have been studied quite extensively now over the last 40 years to see if there are any other short-term or long-term complications. In terms of the short-term complications, the single most important one is overstimulation, called ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. It occurs in about 1% of patients treated with the regimes we used to use until 2 or 3 years ago. Women have died from hyperstimulation syndrome, not in Australia, but certainly in Europe and in the US. Today, however, ovarian hyperstimulation can be avoided with new approaches to the trigger injection using a drug that stimulates the brain to produce a natural surge of hormones, prevents ovarian hyperstimulation. Today, that should no longer be an issue in clinics and with clinicians who understand modern IVF. In the long term, patients have now been studied for up to 30 years, and there does not appear to be an increased risk of cancer. Small studies have raised concerns, but the large epidemiological studies out of the US and of Scandinavia have not shown an increase in ovarian cancer, breast cancer, uterine cancer. By now, we should have seen these changes if they were going to occur. In relation to the children, who are probably the most studied group of children in our society, the outcomes from IVF appear to be extremely good. There is no question that amongst infertile patients, not necessarily those going through IVF, that there is an slightly increased risk of congenital abnormality. And we see that risk coming out in the IVF ICSI patients. But when compared against other infertile patients who have eventually conceived not through IVF and ART, there is no difference. It's the underlying fertility issue that's important. So while there are some pluses and some minuses in IVF, it would be my view that in the appropriate selection of patients, it is a wonderful treatment that will bring joy and continues to bring joy to many, many couples. But my message, I hope, is to try everything else first. Don't rush in. And don't forget that you can access all the previous episodes by going to our website, www.theivfjourney.com, and select IVF Journey Podcast from the navigation menu.
Thank you for listening to the IVF Journey with Dr. Michael Chapman, the podcast which helps couples negotiate their way through the IVF journey, all the way to parenthood. You can also ask questions by contacting Dr. Chapman's rooms on 1800 111 483 or by emailing him michael.chapman@ivf.com.au.